So this is an odd topic because whenever you use the word diversity, you sound progressive. You sound, that's the name of the game for society today, isn't it? To talk about diversity. Diversity training is certainly something that's a big part of major corporations, accepting people as they are. But the problem with diversity is that we've gotten confused on it. And this particular sermon fits into a life well lived because if you don't understand the way God has made us, and God has made us diverse, then you run into all sorts of problems. And our society is very confused on this issue. In 2015, there was a woman who made the news from Spokane, Washington. Her name was Rachel Dolezal. And you may have read about her. She was the leader of the NAACP in Spokane. And she identified herself as a black African-American woman. But turns out her parents were both Caucasian. And so it came out that here was a woman who said, I identify as black. And so she didn't disown her parents. She readily admitted, yes, those were my parents. They're both Caucasian. But I'm black. And she simply came out and said, I identify myself as being of African American descent, even though I know that I biologically am not. Well, she lost her job, first of all, with the NAACP. She was fired, which was more of a volunteer position. She lost her actual job as well from the bad press of it. And fast forward to 2017, they hunted her down and they asked her how she was doing now. And she still can't find a job. Because as soon as anybody hears her name in the Spokane area, they say, oh, you're that person pretending to be something you're not. And consequently, she says, my life is a wreck. I can't put food on the table for my kids. I can't provide. Now, here's the thing. What she did with race made the news and everybody was disgusted. But we also live in a society where people are doing that with gender all the time. Isn't that exactly what is happening with gender? And yet the reality is that we realize that race is actually a fairly fluid thing. It is fairly hard to track down somebody's ancestry. You can watch, I think it's Ancestry.com that has the commercials where they have given people a DNA test and then they ask them what surprised you about your ancestry. And everybody has found, I didn't realize I had some Native American to me, or I didn't realize that I had European or African, and there's always something about our ancestral genetics that is surprising. Race is a fairly fluid thing. That shouldn't surprise us as Christian because from a Christian viewpoint, we all are one race, aren't we? Amen. You trace it back to Adam and Eve, you trace it back to Noah and his family. We're all of one race. But the news was up in arms over this. And I just pointed out so you realize that the amount of anger at this woman was just over the top. Now, on the other hand, if tomorrow I said, I identify as a woman, and I wouldn't be the first person to do that. I'm not doing that, by the way, for the record. But if I did, I'd receive a very different reaction, wouldn't I? Because when Mr. Jenner came out and said, I identify as a woman, which, by the way, how easy is it to check gender, by the way, versus race? You have either two X chromosomes or you have an X and a Y. If you have an X and a Y, you're a boy. If you have two X's, then you're a girl. And that's basic DNA. And there are boys with genetic difficulties or family difficulties or social difficulties, and there are girls with genetic difficulties and health difficulties and social difficulties, but there are boys and girls. But if I came out and I said, I know my DNA is an X and a Y, but I identify as a woman, I'd be lauded as a hero. In fact, you'd see it on the news. Preacher for the Church of Christ came out and was willing to say, I'm a woman in my heart. That sermon would make the news, wouldn't it? Now, we live in difficult times. And I want you to understand that the people who are struggling with these sorts of identity things, the truth is, it's not really them that is the problem. But because behind them is a society that is confused. Behind them is a society that won't plant its feet one way or the other. And behind that issue is the devil laughing. Because here is the problem. Every society in the history of the world has begun to crumble at one particular moment. Studies of sociology, they've shown this time and time again, that when one particular element of society breaks down, you can mark it down, this is the beginning of the end. And you know what it is? The family unit. When you no longer have the family unit, which is made up of a dad and a mom and kids, you no longer have a society, because every society is simply a matter of a bunch of families put together. That's all it is, each one being a link in the chain. Now, your Bible does this beautiful thing. One of the things I love most about the Bible is it takes difficult issues and makes them very, very simple. When Jesus was asked about marriage, when Jesus was asked about life and gender, he simply says in Matthew chapter 19, he says, "Have you not read, in the beginning God made them male and female." Do you know that's the entire text on biblical gender roles? Right there. Is there a difference between men and women? Yes. Why? Because God made them that way. There's a quote attributed to Einstein, and I don't know whether it's true or not. It may be one of those Facebook things like, the internet is the source of all evil, quoted by Abraham Lincoln. Maybe one of those things, I don't know. But I've seen it enough that I'm pretty sure it actually is him. And I tried to trace it down, and I'm pretty sure it's him. But one of the things that's attributed to Albert Einstein is he says that if you ask a fish to climb a tree, he'll spend his whole life as a failure. That's really true. There's lots of things where if you try and use something in a way it's not designed to be, it's going to feel lousy about itself. And whether you're talking about homosexuality or gender identity issues or husband-wife role issues or masculinity and femininity, the moment you say, I know this is the way God designed us, but we're going to try and act a different way, you know what you're going to spend your whole life feeling like? A failure. Because no matter how hard I try, I will make a horrible woman. I could spend my whole life. And in the homosexual community, men are doing that, aren't they? The Bible talks about being effeminate. That's just simply the idea of a man trying to act in a feminine way, a soft way. When a man tries to talk like a woman or dress like a woman or act like a woman, does he ever do it as well as a woman? Never. You know why? Because fish aren't good at climbing trees. The idea behind this week is to talk about how to live a life the way God intended it to be lived. And one of the aspects of that is that in every area of your life, you have to do two things. Look at where God wants you to go and run that way as fast as you can. And then also understand that there are some doors that God closes to you, that you're just simply not going to be. I remember watching the Olympics, and the first time I watched the Olympics, and I realized that all of these Olympic athletes were younger than me. For the first time, I was watching the Olympics, and I could no longer say, I could be. No! That ship has sailed! At this point, my oldest daughter is almost 14. Her career in gymnastics is dead. If she wanted to be a world-class gymnast, they peaked at 12 and a half. In life, there are certain things you do end up having, except you say, okay, that door is closed for me. And one of the things that the devil wants us to do is to take the doors that God has opened and say, don't walk through those doors. And then take the doors that God has closed for you and spend your whole life trying to open them back up. And when we have a society of men who are trying to act more feminine and women are trying to act more masculine, guess what we have? A bunch of fish trying to figure out how to climb trees, and nobody's good at anything. And every aspect suffers. Every aspect of your life suffers the moment you stop trying to be who God designed you to be. When it says, have you not read God made them? That is an instructive statement made in Genesis and then reiterated by the Son of God to remind you, you're designed for certain things and there are certain things you're not designed for. You take an atheist and he spends his whole life trying to say, I am not meant for worship. There is no God. But you know what we end up doing if we try and deny the existence of a God who deserves our worship? We just end up worshiping other things. Everybody does it. The moment you say, I'm not designed to worship God. I'm not designed to humble myself before Him. I'll just live my life for me and I'll make myself the center of my universe and I'll worship my own. I'm back to worshiping. See, we always are looking for something to worship. You know why? God made you as a worshipful creature. Ecclesiastes says God set eternity in your heart. In the same way, God designed men a certain way, He designed women a certain way. And it isn't just about America. See, I'm not interested really in preaching sermons to make America a better place. In some ways, maybe the best thing for Christianity would be for America to become a worse place. I wonder about that sometimes. I don't know if you do, but sometimes when I'm laying in bed just thinking, I wonder, maybe the right thing for us as a country is to just get worse and worse and worse so that people will really, really know how much they need God. I'm not interested in trying to preach sermons to make America a better place. Maybe the best thing for America is to become a worse place. But I am very interested in preaching sermons that make Christians better Christians, because the worse America gets and the darker it gets, the more our lights need to shine. And I do really want you, in spite of the culture around you, to have a good life. Not just because you'll be happy, although I think that's true, but also because the world needs you to be a sign of there's another way. There's another option out there. So tonight, that's really what we want to look at, is the difference between men and women. And some of these things are just common sense things, but they're things that take some bravery to stand by. When I talk to young men and women a lot, they'll talk to me about dating. And young men are very confused. They don't know whether they should open the door for women or not. See, I open the door for her, and that seems like it's a nice thing to do, but on the other hand, she might think that I think she's worthless because I open that door for her. What do you think you are? I can't open a door for myself? Because they've actually gotten that reaction sometimes. There's confusion in the society, and we're supposed to be the ones with the answers. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what are God's answers. So there are some differences between men and women. I'm not sure what it is I'm doing with this particular. There we go. I got it right now. Okay. There's an on switch on these things, apparently. When you talk about men and women, there are certain things that men are designed for, and there are certain things that women are designed for, and I want you to be proud of those things that you're designed for, and I want you to work on honing your ability in those areas. So when we talk about men are designed to be empire builders. Now, an empire builder is simply you're designed to build things. You think outside of yourself and you think about conquest. Men are designed this way. We're designed for work. In Genesis chapter 2 and in Genesis chapter 3, you have God talking to Adam, and before there was sin, God told Adam to do something in the Garden of Eden. What was it? It's tend the garden. Keep it. That's work. He gave that job to Adam. Now, that job didn't go away after sin. Instead, now, what did he add? He says, you're going to work now, but now it's going to be, there's going to be some thorns, and there's going to be some sweat. So you're not always going to like it. And of course, that is true, and it's one of the great temptations of being a man is to shirk work. But the reality is that men are designed to like it, to be fulfilled by it. You are designed, if you are a man, you are designed to work. Whether it be a job of manual labor where you're working with your hands, or whether it be working in a project manager and you're putting things together, or whether it's building computer programs. It can be more cerebral type of stuff. It doesn't matter. A product is important to us. In fact, a friend of mine over the years, he's a principal at school, and he said, you know, I have to work with my hands at home. He liked working on house renovation projects. He said, the reason I have to work at stuff at home with my hands is because my job, I don't have anything tangible to see that I've created. So I go to work as a principal, and you have these kids, and they flow through, and you wonder, you know, you have them for a couple of years, and then off they go. He says, and every once in a while, 10 years later, I'll see a kid at a grocery store who's now a grown adult, and they'll say, thank you so much. But those are few and far between. A lot of times I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And so he made up for that by working on house projects. He would renovate his kitchen, because at the end he'd say, I have a kitchen, I made it. And there's that sense of work that is so valuable to men. And yet our society is creating more and more men who don't work. Engender in your sons a work ethic. And engender in yourself a work ethic, men. Go out and create. Go out and build. It's part of how God has made you, and there's nothing the devil loves more than a generation of men who are lazy. And so men are designed for work. We're also designed for conquest. Now in 1 Samuel chapter 8, Samuel is confronted by the Jews because they're no longer happy with the judge and deliverer system that God had given them, and they've looked at the other surrounding nations, and they come to Samuel and they say, Samuel, give us a queen. No. They said, Samuel, give us a king like the nations around us. So even out in the pagan world, they had kings, not queens. And if you look throughout the whole of human history, there have been some ruling queens, but in general, what do you see? You see kings. Do you know why? Because that's the way God made us. As you look at the great deliverers throughout the Bible, the great conquest rulers and kings, you're looking at men. And the reason is not because men always make better decisions. It's not true. Men often make horrible decisions. But men are made for conquest, to see out and say, this is where we're going, to set a direction and head that way. Men are meant to dream big. We're meant to be people who think about large and gargantuan things, to take moonshots. Every man is designed by God to have big dreams. And this works two ways. One, men, don't just dream and do nothing. Don't just talk about what you're going to do. Don't spend your whole life watching football games saying, oh, I could have done it better than that guy. Because that's one way that we fulfill our sense of conquest, is that we look at other people and we become the critic. the anti-conquest. We look and we say, oh, well, I could have done it better than that guy. And we become the person who's always telling everybody else how they could have done it better. That is not having your own dream and your own journey. That's just about you letting your light shine brighter by making others go out. It's not the same thing. And then women, those men in your life, whether they be your sons or your husbands or your grandsons or just any sort of man, young or old in your life, let them dream. And not every dream is going to come true. Not every conquest wins. If a nation goes out to battle, does every battle plan win? We're going to fall flat on our faces, but don't tell us to stop dreaming. Feed that within us, that leadership. Men are designed to lead, and we don't start out good at it. Some of us don't even end up good at it. But we try. And we're designed by God to try. And men are designed to provide. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, I want you to turn over there and look at those verses for a second because they're so important. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. It says, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. A widow is to be put on the list only if she's not less than 6 years old, having been the wife of one man. Now, verse 9 is the beginning of a new topic where we're going to talk about taking care of needy widows. But it's butted right up against verse 8 where he says, a man who will not provide for his own. You notice it doesn't say her own, does it? It says his own is worse than a what? Worse than an unbeliever. So in verse 8, Paul is telling Timothy, you tell men, provide. And a man who will not provide is worse than an unbeliever. And then in verse 9, when a woman is needy, what should you do? You have a widow, take care of her. Do you see the gender role difference just in one verse to the other? 8 to 9. Men are designed to provide. There is no provision within the Scriptures for a male who's lost his wife to be taken care of by the church. You realize that? And yet there's almost an entire chapter devoted to the need to take care of a woman who doesn't have a husband to provide for her. Now the reason for that is because have you not read? In the beginning, God made them male and female. Because men are meant to provide. And if you're a man who's ever lost your job, you can attest to the reality that of the things that are horrible that can happen to a man, that's about one of the top of the list, isn't it? When a man is unemployed, it guts him. And going through this, by the way, is not to shame a man who is trying to provide, but is struggling to do so. That's not what this verse is for. This verse is for the 50-year-old man in his mother's basement. I'll tell you a true story. We all joke about that. I actually live next to that. My next door neighbor is a woman in her 80s. Her husband passed away. She lives there with her 50-year-old son who has never moved out, and he is married. He has grandchildren. His wife does not live there. His children do not live there. His grandchildren do not live there, but he has never moved out. I know that's extreme, but it's a real thing. He's just across the fence from me. And do you know what he does every time I get a chance to talk to him? He tells me how everybody else is doing it wrong. It's the design for conquest, but he's a critic. And he's unhappy and he's miserable. You know why? Because he knows he needs his mom. But he doesn't like needing it because it's a horrible circumstance for everybody. Everything about a man is designed for work. Our physical bodies, as a general rule, men are stronger than women, right? I've met some women that could whoop me. But in general, men are built for strength and provision. And we need to feed that. We need to feed that idea of one of the greatest things you can do with your life as a man is go out and work a job and provide. And you know what we've said is the opposite. We've told young men, go out, and if your job doesn't make you happy, just quit it. But do you know, where in your Bible does it say that? You know, I know grown men who have a family to provide for, and they say, I'm just not happy with my job, and they quit without another job lined up. And they just quit. They said, but I wasn't happy. As if that's enough. You know what? God designed us to provide first. And the truth is, that's very hard sometimes. But if you have a man who works day in and day out and puts food on the table, and he works a job that's just nothing special, digging ditches, but every day he comes home, puts food on the table, and he raises, he has a wife and kids and raises the kids, and they all grow up, and they too go on to work jobs where they don't always enjoy everything they do, but they grow up and they work hard. Is that man a success with his life? It's not flashy, but it's a successful life. And for all you men who have spent your lives working jobs that were not as fulfilling, in a society that says, you know, you really ought to have a fulfilling job that just makes you feel like you're the king of the world, that you're the greatest thing ever. If you've been spending your life working a job that maybe just isn't the bee's knees, thank you. You're everything that's right in this world. God designed men for this. And we need to engender that in men. Now, women, on the other hand, are not empire builders. They're what I call people builders. Women could care less about whether the castle is up. They care how full the castle is. You know, women are the ones who want... Think about even Mary and Martha. Doesn't it make sense? I understand Martha made the wrong call with trying to get all of the provisions and make sure that the dinner was all right, and get all the fine china and the placemats all in order. But let's be honest, when you hear Martha saying to Jesus, would you just please ask my sister to help me with this? Doesn't that make sense to you? That's a very womanly thing to do, isn't it? It's not surprising, and I think in reality, that's probably why Jesus was so gentle with her in his response. He did rebuke her. There's one thing that's important, but he starts with Martha, Martha. This kind of, okay, let's focus here. Right? You're doing this to make the people happy. I think the people are happy. The Son of God's here. Her intention in her heart was to take care of people. And it's a very feminine thing. Because you see, women are designed by God to help. In Genesis chapter 2, down in verse 18, after God had made Adam, told him, you go and work, you take care of the field, somebody had to take care of Adam. And so God created Eve, a helper suitable for him. And so we should not lower the value of that. What is wrong with helping people? See, there are other areas that we really highly value that. We were just the other night, we were at the Hayfors and we were watching the Portland Trail Blazers play the Golden State Warriors. I'm sorry, by the way. My condolences. And Draymond Green was doing very well for the Golden State Warriors. And one of the things they were tracking, they were so impressed with, was his rebounds and assists. Well, what's an assist? The guy didn't make the basket, did he? What's an assist? You gave the ball and helped somebody else make a basket. In sports, we laud that with praise, don't we? Look at that guy. How unselfish. Look at how he saw somebody else who could make the shot, and instead of being the prima donna that says, I've got to have the ball, he passed it, and that guy made the shot, and he got the point, and we give him credit for that. And yet when women are helpmeets to their husbands, when they give up a job, a career, to work 3 times as hard and get paid nothing, we go, what a waste of your life. Do we not see the hypocrisy in this? Let's at least be consistent. If we're going to be consistent, we should never count RBIs in baseball. That's runs batted in, where a guy knocks it in and another guy makes a run. No, stop counting that. Stop counting assists in basketball. Stop paying attention to the blockers in football. None of that matters. Just give me a quarterback and a wide receiver, and we'll see how we can take on the whole team. If we're going to be consistent, we need to stop counting assisting in anything, don't we? And yet we all know in the sports arena, these things are fundamental to team success. Why, oh why, do we not give women the credit they deserve? You truly do work so much harder. See, sometimes people say amen, I go, you're just making that amen to make fun of me, like last night with Brandon. That one deserved an amen. Every husband married to a good, godly woman knows that he's been given a gift from God. And we need to tell people that that's not a lesser job, that that's not something that's of no value, but it's actually something that takes some very specialized skills. And just ask my kids. If I'm watching the kids, I almost said babysitting. That just tells you how good I am at it. If I'm watching the kids and mom's away at something, the kids will tell you, Dad's just like out to lunch. He doesn't even know. No, you're supposed to have this. And I cannot handle it. My kids have problems and they're arguing with each other and they come to me and okay, stop. I can listen to you and then I'll listen to you and then I'll listen to you and then I'll make an edict. My wife listens to all three at once and gets the right answer. I don't know how that works. But she is designed in a very different way. See, she is designed to see other people's needs. If you turn over to Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9, down in verse 39, it says, so Peter arose and he went with them, and when he arrived, they brought him into the upper room, and all the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing all the tunics and garments that Dorcas used to make while she was with them. There's this woman named Dorcas, and she had died, and when she died, what was her legacy? Peter was called to try and save her, and when she died and Peter was on his way and going in to see the body, which he would eventually raise her from the dead, what was the legacy of her life? All these people saying, look at what she made for me. Look at how she thought of me. All the widows, all the needy saying, look at what she did for me. My wife can write a beautiful thank you note. I am happy when you can read my thank you notes. There's just a design difference in us. She is so much more in tune with, and it's a skill set that not only was she naturally given a tendency toward that I don't have, but she's also made it a honed skill. And that's what I'm saying is, do not be afraid to tell your children, do not be afraid to tell your daughters that this is a valuable skill to see the needs of other people and to help them be the best that they can be. There's an old saying, it's the hand that rocks the cradle, right? Nobody ever knows the mother, but I'll tell you, when a football team wins and the interviewers go up, what are you going to do now? And they say, I'm going to Disneyland. And then they say, hi, Mom. They never say, hi, Dad. Because Mom was there. Mom made sure their jerseys were clean. Mom made sure that they had Band-Aids every time they scraped their knees. Mom was there on the sideline saying, good job. Now, Dad was over there with advice, right? You know, you missed your hit, and there was a lane that could open. You could have made that cut. And Dad's always got advice, but you know what they remember? Mom saying, I'm so proud of you. Because she saw the need of the little kid where Dad's just trying to fix the problem. The kid needed somebody to say, what you're doing now is good enough. And you keep it up and you'll just get better. That's why they say, hi, Mom, and not hi, Dad. Because moms are designed to bring the best out of others. In Proverbs chapter 31, it's not just mothers, by the way. We're talking about feminine roles. Women in general do this in so many different ways. But in Proverbs chapter 31, you look at the worthy woman, and one of the things that is interesting is in chapter 31 where it talks about her. Proverbs 31 is about the woman, not the man. It's an entire chapter dedicated to the qualities and value of women and femininity. And then in Proverbs chapter 31, down in verse 23, it says, her husband is known in the gates. That is, known in the gates is referring to the fact that the gates was where judicial proceedings happened, where the elders of the city sat. And so here in this list of all her qualities, it says, and her husband is known as a great man, would be another way of putting that. You know what's interesting to me? Proverbs 31 gave her the credit for that. Not him. Proverbs 31 is not saying, she married an elder. He wasn't an elder when she married him. But she made him the best he could possibly be. Because women are amazing at building people. Now, another aspect of men is men are designed by God to be protectors. Men are designed for war. In Numbers chapter 1, when you have the counting of the people, there was a counting up of those who could go to war, and it goes through every single tribe and lists all of the different people who could go to war. And you know who it lists? It's a census of men 20 years old and above. Wait a second. Can't women go to war? Well, yeah, you could put a woman on the front lines, and that's been debated, hasn't it? We've had these discussions. Should women be in roles of combat? We're discussing these very things as a nation right now. But you know who's designed for it? Men. Men are designed and made for battle. We can compartmentalize. Men can forget about everything that's going on, get out of the trench, get out of the foxhole, and go, and we can die. And we can do it for a greater cause than ourselves. We can shut everything down and be brave. And men are designed to do that. And along with that is a sense of duty. In Deuteronomy chapter 24, I want you to turn over to Deuteronomy with me and look at this particular verse. Because it's really a profound statement about how men think. Deuteronomy 24, down in verse 5, it says, here's a commandment to the Jews. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out with the army, nor be charged with any duty. He shall be free at home 1 year, and shall give happiness to his wife whom he has taken. I want you to imagine for a second that you switch the roles. Why is there not a command that women not go out to war for a year, not worry about their sense of duty, but instead spend the first year of their marriage trying to make their husbands happy? Why is there no command for that? Because women do it naturally. But do you know that men have committed suicide because there was a draft for war? During World War II, when there was a draft and men had to go to war, there were men who signed up. And they said, I want... Do you know what some of those men did? They killed themselves out of the shame that they couldn't serve. They killed themselves because they couldn't go to some foreign land and die. That sense of duty was so strong in them. That is a gift from God. God has designed us that way so much that He had to put a command in here. He says, now wait a second, there are some times where that global sense of duty to brother and country you need to hold back. If you are newly married, how about you try and make your wife happy for 1 year before you make her miserable for all the rest? Give her 1 good year before it goes downhill. That command is there because it's so strong in men. And what have we done to it? We try and remove it. We try and remove that sense of duty and honor and dignity. Men, do not be afraid to be those kind of people. Men should be people of sacrifice. In Ephesians chapter 5, when talking about husbands and wives, it talks about husbands, love your wives, and then God writes things in language that makes sense to us. He says, husbands, love your wives, and then it gives us an analogy so we can understand what love looks like. And he says, like Christ does the church, and what did Christ do? He died for it. And men, when they think of a robber coming into their house, and they think of their family upstairs, and they think, somebody has to go downstairs and protect the family. Somebody has to put their life on the line. I might be shot. I might be cut with a knife. Honey, you go. It's not what we do, is it? It's not what we do. We swell, we say, I will go. That's masculinity. And I want you to understand that's not chauvinistic. It's not this picture of misogyny that you get in the world that it says, oh, any man who thinks he's a big man. No, this is, I would die. I would die for my loved ones. I'll line up, shoot me first. That sense of sacrifice and duty and responsibility, this is what we want in our sons. And do not be afraid to lead them down that road. Let me tell a story about Gus and Libby real quick. You hear me choking up already. Ugh. This is one of those dad things. I choke up because my son was so manly about it. Gus was desperately afraid of chickens. So afraid. I mean, we're talking terror. He heard a cluck and that kid would be back here. I mean, he would scream and cry. And we're talking about when he was like 1. And then Libby came home. This is a kid, if he saw a picture of a chicken, he would scream and hide behind his mother's skirt. And then Libby came home, and he was still terrified of chickens, but we went to a zoo one day, and I kind of got to the point where I had the radar on where the chickens. You know, because I just knew it was going to be a big thing, and I just wasn't paying attention because now I have another kid home, and Dad doesn't multitask. Remember that whole part of the conversation? Okay, so Dad is focused on some other things, and he sees a chicken in the farm section, and he screams the exact same way he did before, but you know what he does this time? He goes, Libby, no! And he goes toward the chicken to protect his little sister from the monstrous beast. It's a funny story, but that's masculinity, isn't it? It's bravery. In his own little way, he was saying, I would die for you. We want our sons to be that way. We want them to be brave and sacrificial. And so don't stunt that in them. In the same way, our daughters are meant to be healers. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, down in verse 7. I want you to look over there, and in the same way that men are meant to be protectors, after the men are done protecting, the women are supposed to patch them up. And we joke and laugh, but there's a lot of truth to that idea. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, down in verse 7, he says, Paul, when trying to describe his relationship with the nation, with the Thessalonian church, he says, but we prove to be gentle among you as a nursing mother tenderly cares for her own children. Why does it talk about a nursing mother tenderly caring for her children when he's trying to describe gentleness? Because is there any more gentle picture? Women are designed to have that bedside manner that men simply don't have. That's why historically women have made better nurses than men. And I'm not saying, if there's a male nurse out here, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying a man can't be a nurse, but I understand women have a bedside manner that you don't have. I have some friends who are male nurses, and you know what? At the hospitals, they say, we love having you. We need somebody to pick the body up and move it over here. It's a true story. That's exactly it. Yeah, I can always find a job because they need somebody to carry things. Men can be nurses too, but it's just a difference. They're made to mend. 1 Samuel chapter 25, and I won't go and read that there because of time and whatnot, but I recommend you go and read that story yourself. In 1 Samuel 25, David was angry at Nabal. because Nabal had sent his men back ashamed, and David had asked him to give him some things after David had taken care of Nabal's shepherds out in the wilderness. And David said, that's it, men, mount up. Every man grab his sword. We're going to go slaughter Nabal and all of his people. And it was wrong to do, but David was hot. Men do not deal with disrespect very well, do we? And so he's headed down. Well, Abigail, Nabal's wife, hears about it, and she goes to David. And that woman says everything right. And I recommend you go read those verses on your own. Everything that she says is kind and generous. David, one of these days you're going to be king. And you don't want this mar on your record. You'll regret it. You're a great man. This is not a great man thing to do. She knew exactly how to mend David's heart, to fix that relationship and make it healthy. God has designed women to be very, very good at that sort of thing. Good at tenderness and thoughtfulness. Women are designed by God so that they have an ability to think about things that men just don't pay any attention to, typically in relationships. How often is it that it's the women who are the first to notice, did you notice so-and-so? Oh, I'll be getting in the car on the way home from services, and my wife will say, did you notice so-and-so? And I said, well, who? What? Huh? I'm hungry. She said, no, so-and-so. Did you notice that they just didn't look themselves? I said, they were fine. They didn't. No, they just kind of looked unhappy. I think I'll give them a call. Sure enough, while I was hungry, my wife had figured out there was somebody who just had a horrible thing happen in their life. And she just kind of knew it because she put her feelers out there. That extrasensory perception that women have, that men just don't have. That's a good thing. It's a gift from God. It's something that you are designed to do, and you will always do it better than any man ever would. Very quickly, men are meant for bold leadership. Men are designed to be harnessed strength. If you look over at 1 Corinthians chapter 16, down in verse 13, it says simply there in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 13, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Do you realize that men is used, acting like men, that's used as an adjective. Who is he? He's a man actor. He's manly. We use it as an adjective. That idea of he is to act like a man, be strong. Men are designed to be bold and strong, and one of the things that we fail in society in particular right now is men are not being strong and they're not being bold. They're not acting like men. We're being a bunch of cowards. Think of the great leaders from God. Moses, Joshua, all the judges. Wait. Were all the judges men? People bring this one up. So wait a second, there was a woman there, Deborah. Let me show you what Deborah says about her being one of the judges. In Judges chapter 5, first of all, she was a judge, but when it was time to go to war, did she go to war? No, she called the general, said, you go. And then when he wouldn't go, said, you're a big baby. And you're going to be cursed because of it, and a woman's going to get the glory instead of you. But there's a psalm after all that in Judges chapter 5 where Deborah sings about her judgeship and the victories God caused her. And one of the things that she says in there is, I arose a mother in Israel when the rulers ceased. Literally, Deborah's take on it was, I stepped up and God blessed me in stepping up because none of the men would step up. And do you know that happens in marriages all the time? And women step into these roles and they wear the pants in the family, as the way the old saying goes, and they're always directing orders, and we blame them for being so manly. But you know what is almost always behind a woman who is acting and wearing the pants? A man who didn't fulfill his job of leading. I've had a woman come up to me one time. She said, look, I don't know what to do, Scott. I don't know what to do. I know what the Bible says, that he's supposed to be the head of the house, but he won't work. And I'm not going to let the kids starve. So I've got to go to work. And then he won't make any decisions on anything. He just sits there and says, well, whatever you want. And so somebody has to decide. And so I work the job and I make the decisions and I tell the kids what to do. And now all of a sudden I'm in this position and I don't want to be in it. And she was 100% right. Why did Deborah arise? Because men wouldn't. That's not on Deborah. Deborah was a valiant, godly woman that God used because no men showed up. And history has been full of godly women who've stepped up to lead their families because the men just didn't show up. And it ought not to be that way. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice. And you can take it or leave it. Advice is worth what you paid for. But the next time you're in one of these conversations, where do you want to go to dinner? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? Well, honey, whatever you want. Well, honey, I just whatever you want. The next time you get in that kind of conversation with your wife or your girlfriend, make a decision. She just wants you to lead. She just wants you to lead. She really doesn't care. Now, I will tell you, there's a flip side to that. When he makes a decision, don't say, but not, no, I don't, anything but Mexican. I don't, no, not Italian. No, just, if you really say whatever you want, he was asking your opinion before he led. You got to let him. But men lead. Stop sitting in this decision paralysis that men do, where we figured out, it's easier to make no decision because the moment I make a decision, somebody's going to blame me for how it turned out. We do that, don't we, as men? We go, well, I don't want the blame, so we sit around and we say, well, how do you think you'd do this job? And 5 guys will be standing around waiting for one guy to say, I think we should do it this way, and then we'll go, let's do it like that, and if it doesn't turn out, blame John. That's not leadership. And we do it in our marriages, and we do it in our lives. Men, don't be somebody who, if God were to say of your family, Deborah rose because rulers ceased. Women, on the other hand, are capable of a quiet and beautiful strength that simply men cannot do. I want you to turn over to 1 Peter chapter 3 with me. Because every aspect of this quiet, beautiful strength you can find in these few verses. 1 Peter chapter 3. It says, in the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. I want you to notice there's a difference between men and women. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, men, if your wife is disobedient to the gospel, the best way to win her is to say nothing. Do you know what wives think when their husbands won't say anything? They think you're mad at them. He just wouldn't even talk to me. I don't know what he's thinking about. He's thinking about the football game, is what he's thinking about. But it doesn't matter. But on the other hand, here you have wives that say, wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, that is, even if they're ungodly, even if they don't fear God, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. Women, you do not understand the amount of power that you have in this world just by what you do. It is an amazing thing the way, here it is, God has made us on this planet, and then the things that we sometimes struggle the most to do is the very thing that we need to do. Men are not good talkers, but you know what you have to do in your marriage, men? You're going to have to start doing some talking and some communicating. Women are great talkers, and you know what you got to do sometimes? Maybe do a little less. Because when a man sees a woman, that he loves, and she's doing her best to live a godly life, and she's not constantly nagging him. You ought to do this better. But she just lives her life and tries to be good and faithful and righteous, and he makes decisions, and he realizes if he makes a decision, she'll say, okay. And she really will follow him, even if it's not a good decision. You know what he starts doing? He starts thinking about the decisions he makes because he realizes they actually matter. Men don't care about what decisions they're going to make if they think, well, as soon as I say we should do this, she's going to tell me all the ways that I'm doing it wrong. But when he thinks, oh no, if I make a bad decision, a flippant one, she's just going to go along with it, and we're going to go like lemmings off the cliff because I was an idiot, they start thinking about it. Men can be changed by a godly woman who just says, I will live a godly life. I'm not going to try and make you a Christian by force, but I'm just going to live it myself, and men will fall apart. We do not even know what to do. And there are case after case after case that I could give you of men who were married, they were unbelievers, they were married to a woman, she becomes a Christian because women in general tend to be more interested in spiritual stuff. Guys, we got problems. And so she starts going to services, and he's not interested, but, oh, fine, I'll go for her. And so she never tells him, you need to become a Christian too. But she just keeps going, and eventually he sits in that pew right next to her, and he sees the kind of woman she is, and he sees how, you know what, I like this wife that I have now that she's obeyed the gospel a lot more than I liked the wife I had before. And he sees it, and something starts to change in him. And he has no choice. That's what I want you to see. That's how powerful it is. Your quiet, beautiful strength, he has no choice but to be pricked by it. Because God designed you to have this ability to win us over without even a single word. I can tell you of times where I made a decision flippantly. I was